Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to this meeting of Area 3. Been a little time since we've had one. I'm David Thornywell. Your attention is drawn to the agenda, which sets out how meetings will be conducted, including the ground rules. And your attention is also drawn to the rules concerning public speaking in respect of planning applications and committee procedure rules in the council's constitution, which apply to this planning committee. And to remind the speakers before we get there, you're all entitled to speak by not more than 3 minutes. If you exceed 3 minutes, you'll be cut off. Before we start the formal business, we will confirm attendance of voting members by doing a roll call.
Thank you, Chair. When I call your name, please can you confirm that you are present? Councillor Thornywell?
Present.
Councillor Dalton?
Present.
Councillor Bell? Present. Councillor Benderson?
Present.
We have received apologies from Councillor Bishop. Councillor Cannon? Councillor Davies?
Present.
We have received apologies from Councillor Hammond. Councillor Hickmott?
Present.
Councillor Kears? Councillor McDermott? We have received apologies from Councillor Oakley. Councillor Williams?
Present.
I confirm we have 10 committee members present.
Thank you very much. Could I ask the officers present in the chamber to introduce themselves?
I'm Susan Field. I'm a Senior Planning Officer.
Sally Wang, Democratic Services Officer.
And we also have Joy attending remotely.
Hello, Joy Ukadike, Head of Legal and Democratic Services. I'm the legal officer for tonight.
And James Bailey, sorry, James.
Hello. Good evening, members. James Bailey, Head of Planning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I should say that the members in the chamber here who are members of the committee take part and vote. Other members who are not members of the committee, in particular Trudy Dean, who's joined us, can take part but can't vote or propose anything, and that also applies to members who might be attending remotely, and I can see Roger Roud for one. Right. Now we go on to the public speakers. Sorry? You'd like to introduce that? Yeah, all right. Yes, do. Sorry. Thank you. I'll get back on track to my script. So we have members of the public here wishing to address the committee and the representative, the agent representing the applicant. The speaking time limit is 3 minutes of each application continues to be applied. So as I've said, do please stick to 3 minutes. And can I remind speakers that your face and voice may appear in live stream, and the archive recording of this meeting and your names will be recorded in the minutes. I've got a little list of 15 people, plus the applicant's agents, and the first person on my list is Maria Douglas. Oh, sorry, I haven't done apologies, I'm jumping it. Right, it's because I haven't done one for such a long time. So the apologies we've got are?
We have apologies from Councillor Bishop, Councillor Oakley and Councillor Hammond.
And are there any declarations of interest? Not aware of any. None. And then if you can remember, and I sign the minutes of the meeting that was held on the 8th of June 2023 as a correct record, please. You've agreed, thank you. And I would draw your attention to item 5, which is a glossary and supplementary matters, and which confirms all the lettering you're seeing, what it means. And that then brings me on decision to be taken by the committee, TM 24 00769, land and building east of Rose Cottage, 440 Lunsford Lane, Barkfield, Aylesford. Demolition of existing workshop and office space and replacement with new mixed-use office and workshop space, Class E, and detached garage to the rear. And now I will come to the public. Did you want to do a presentation? Yes, go on then. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. The application before members tonight is for the demolition of the existing building and the erection of a replacement building with a mixed use as office and workshop, falling in with use class EG, the Town and Country Planning Use Class Order. This slide shows the existing building in relation to the site and the surrounding area. The next slide shows the proposed building, again in relation to the surrounding area. This slide shows the proposed front and rear elevations. Rose Cottage is here on the right, and the building on the left, just shown, is an ancillary building to the dwelling known as the barn. This slide is the proposed ground floor. This element here is the, can you see my mouth? Yes, is the workshop area, coloured in sort of pink on the screen. Down on the right-hand side is the office use, and to the front are 3 parking spaces, which are actually within the garage. So the office element is actually, sorry, the workshop element is only 55 square metres. The next plan is the first floor plan, and that's all offices. Whilst, as the committee report notes, it's not fundamental to the application to agree the lawful use, I have included a few internal photographs as these are specifically referred to in the committee report. This slide shows the inspection chamber, which would be used to enable works to be carried out under a vehicle. The picture on the left-hand side is from the mezzanine level, is the office of the old building. The 2 pieces of paper on the wall are the historic paperwork referenced in the committee report at paragraph 6.7. The other is obviously the toilet facilities within the building. The next few slides are photographs of the existing. This is the rear. The top left one is the front elevation. Again, this building here is the ancillary building 2 next door. And this one down here is Rose Cottage here on the left, and some hard standing shown down on the floor there. This is from the site looking down to Lunsford Road, which is down here, and these are the 2 residential dwellings. The next slide shows they're 2 comparable slides. This one is the existing and this one is the proposed. I thought it'd be useful to put them side by side. And then the next one shows the extant permission for the dwelling, again with the proposed, just to give you scale and what was actually agreed under the dwelling application. The application before committee members tonight is not a retrospective application. What is and has happened on site is not material in the consideration of the application. Establishing the lawful use of the building is not essential in the determination of the application. The application is for a mixed-use building falling within use class EG. Under government legislation, use class EG of the Town and Country Use Classes Order specifically relates to uses which can be carried out in residential areas without causing detriment to the amenity of that area. Condition 4, set out in the committee report, would ensure that the building remains within this use class and not for other purposes, retaining control over the use of the building. The workshop element comprises only 55 square metres, so it is constrained by its size in any event. The site comprises previously developed land, and as such, the redevelopment of the site is acceptable in principle. In regard to the access, again, members are reminded that this is not a retrospective application. Kent County Council raised no objection to the proposal. Kent County Council also confirmed that they are fully aware of the existing restrictions on Lunsford Lane and duly considered them in making the recommendation of no objection. Paragraph 66.53 of the committee report confirms that these comments remain even if the lawful use is not established. Kent County Council also reiterates that the actual workshop area proposed is only 55 square metres. Therefore, for the reasons set out in the committee report, your officer's recommendation is to approve subject to condition.
Thank you. Now I get to the members of the public, and the first one is Maria Douglas. If you'd like to come forward and sit there and press the button. So a red light. Once you start speaking, you'll be allowed 3 minutes.
Having stood at the Grenfell Tower on that sad night of the 14th of June 2017, throughout the night working, watching people die, being consumed with flames, jumping from the upper floors and facing burning to death, and or knowing the fact that they have the choice of jumping or burning. Active callers still on the phones, knowing the fact the LFB couldn't reach them at a certain point, wondering if the building was going to collapse, just having a living nightmare as a tier 1 responder. This has affected myself to the point of I've chosen to live in Lunsford Lane, quiet area, chocolate box, where I can get my and not have certain noises which interrupt my existence, which I had to endure that night. Having had an experience recently from the actual said building through new plaques, it caused a lot of stress. I could hear it in my garden. I live at 4. So I just do not want this occurring in my life if that was a taste of the future. I have acute triggers, which loud noises do trigger PTSD in my head, and I do. I am therefore appealing under the Human Rights Act, Protocol 1, Article 1. The protection of property, it is a right to enjoy my existing property peacefully. This right means public authorities have a duty not to interfere with my property unless it's in accordance with the law and in the public interest. Property includes things like residential property and land. You're removing my right of enjoyment, should this planning go ahead, of the property with the noises that are going to come out of this building. I'd also like to note that the building design itself has a tin and metal roof, which is noisy. It has a Juliet balcony. For what purpose? If it's a Class C building. It has bifold glass doors. For what purpose? It's unnecessary for a Class C building. The listings above remain in conflict. Close proximity of this type of grade with these type of grade 2 buildings.
Thank you. Well done for sticking within the 3 minutes.
Would you ask the speakers to speak directly into the microphone, please?
Thank you, Roger. Could I ask Dixie Hart as number 2 on my list? Just for yourself. I know you're speaking for other people later on the list.
I have lived next door to the site for 20 years. The previous owner of the shed at Ray's Cottage was Gordon Carswell, a retired farmer. He used his garage shed to do carpentry work as a hobby. He also had a chair and a desk to do his paperwork in there. I can put my chair and desk in my garage and do paperwork, but that doesn't make it a commercial office. Equally, his two sons' passion was classic cars, so they built a pit in the garage. Working on their own cars equally does not make it a commercial industry unit. All of this has been confirmed to planning by both his sons and neighbours, and photographic evidence has been sent to planning of the interior and exterior of the shed prior to the sale in 24. Planning agreed the shed was agricultural originally, and the two sons and others can confirm the tractor for maintenance was still stored in the shed at the time of selling in 24. There is a quoting planning policy that states land that was last occupied by agriculture is excluded from clauses allowing permission of this application. Planning is also aware the unit had no power, water or drainage, and yet they still reported in the planning officer's opinion it had been used commercially. How can that be without even the basic facilities? When speaking about the distance between the Grade 2 listed buildings, the Conservation Officer wrote to the planning and said, I would remove the separation distances as a reason for acceptability, as the separation is not really that great, and a less industrial building might well have an impact over that distance. This statement is clear. The proposed unit is too close to Grade 2 listed buildings. Planning have reported the distance is almost the same as the house they gave permission for and therefore acceptable. Two wrongs don't make a right, and besides that, the house did not have 93 objections. In fact, it only had one suggestion. I'm unaware of this many objections ever being submitted for this size project. The government's message is clear. Agricultural builds should be used for housing. Tunbridge and Morning Borough Council's own policy and the government say it should be protecting character and amenities and highway, and this proposal is not. I found no planning permission for the shed, so is it even a lawful build? If planning grant this permission, they will by default be taking away permission for a residential home, which is the government's priority. The National Planning Policy Framework states offices should be located in town centres and after this in the edge of town centres where there are plenty of options locally. Tunbridge and Morning Council have policies agreeing with this. I think I brought the wrong page, but that's my fault. Sorry.
Thank you. You're just within the 3 minutes.
Oh, well, then I didn't bring the wrong page. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Next is Brissa Twyman.
I have either lived at Leybourne Lakes or regularly visited for some years now, using the north end of Leybourne Lane to access the lakes to walk my dog with my partner who lives in Lunsford Lane. I am aware of the detail of Planning Submission 76 and the properties immediately around it, which include Grade 2 listed properties dating back to the 1600s in what is a semi-rural location. It is outside of any established urban settlement, thus in the countryside in planning policy terms. The application fails to consider these facts and does not include the required heritage statement. The application for the workshop and office use says the proposal is in keeping with light industrial businesses and will simply replace an existing workshop and office with a new workshop and office. However, it is clear this agricultural shed has never been a workshop and office, and a review of the planning history associated with this application confirms permission has never been granted for workshop or office use. It is common knowledge that the area of land previously sold under prior to submission 76 was sold with full planning permission for a 4-bedroom house, and that the previous approval is harmonious with Annex 2 of the National Planning Policy Framework, which designates offices as a main town centre use, which this semi-rural location isn't. By proposing a main town centre use outside of a town centre in a semi-rural setting, which has existing residential planning approval in place, completely undermines the principles of urban regeneration, reuse of land in established settlements, and conflicts with paragraph 91 of the National Planning Policy Framework that requires a sequential approach to site selection for office uses, which should firstly prioritise locations in defined centres. There is no evidence of a sequential approach or sequential test for commercial use in this instance. The Borough Council's core strategy policy CP14 recognises that development required for the limited expansion of existing authorised employment use in the countryside may be permitted. However, as mentioned above, there is no evidence that any existing employment use has been authorised by the Council, which would be by way of a previously granted planning permission. In addition, the current proposals are for a new development and not a limited expansion. Therefore, this policy CP14 is not applicable and cannot be relied upon by the applicant. Proposed application 76 has clearly not been informed by national and local planning policy, as there is direct conflict caused by the principle of locating a commercial employment use in this semi-rural formal agricultural location instead of adjacent to urban settlements. The current approved residential planning permission fully aligns with the government policy that sites such as these should be released and utilised for residential housing development, something the planning officer's report fails to consider and direct. In conclusion, this is not an area to build out of character industrial units.
Yeah.
That's all right.
Next, we have Chris Grade.
Good evening. I'm speaking on behalf of local residents. I don't live on that part of Lunsford Lane. I live further across the road. I regularly walk my dog down that lane, and there's cyclists going down there. There's all pedestrians going down there, young families going down, pushing buggies. There are no pavements down that lane. You're going to have vans coming in and out this new development if it happens, causing problems. You're going to have a workshop there, which was never a workshop in the first place, as a commercial enterprise. It's going to be noisy, so I feel sorry for the people who are backing onto it. Even if you have office space, I've worked in workshops, I've worked in offices, they're still noisy. Even the people working in there, if you've got a workshop running, people to communicate with each other will end up shouting at each other. Human voice carries quite a way. I'm more concerned about the dangers, though, to the local residents, the blight on the properties around them, and to my mind, up the road, we have two large industrial warehousing estates at the end of New Hive Lane and going down Bellingham Road. Surely this is a more appropriate place to have a development of this kind going on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Fifth person I've got is Laura Weldon.
My husband and I live at Great Lunsford Farmhouse, and we agree with all the points in objection to the application that have and will be raised by the others whose properties are within a short distance of the site of application. My husband and I feel the need to express our personal feelings on the application. We bought the Grade 2 listed Great Lunsford Farmhouse in November 2021 with a view of it being our forever home and watching our children grow up in this amazing environment. If there were any chance of a light industrial commercial building application being made so close to our property, approximately 20 metres away, we would never have gone ahead with the purchase. There is a huge onus and importance in the UK on the preservation of our historic buildings and their surroundings. It is a significant commitment by owners, both in time and finances, to take on a listed building and maintain it to the standard that they deserve. The lengths that owners must rightfully go through regarding changes to the properties are there to protect key elements of the historic buildings and environments. Special Grade 2 listed buildings such as Great Lunsford Farmhouse that we chose to be owners and custodians of for the foreseeable future are at risk of significant and unnecessary degeneration by the potential of this building being in such close proximity. I've referred to paragraph 200 of the National Planning Policy Framework, which explicitly requires that in determining applications, local planning authorities should require an applicant to describe the significance of any heritage assets affected, including any contribution made by their setting. This will be in the form of a heritage statement, which is on the Council's local validation requirement. This site is within the immediate setting of several buildings listed on the National Heritage List for England. These are designated heritage assets of national significance, yet the application is not accompanied by a heritage statement describing the significance of these. It is therefore not possible to understand the effect of development on heritage assets, and it is not demonstrated that the design has been informed by heritage understanding. We and our neighbours have already experienced increased levels of disturbance with the applicant's preemptive preparation towards using the space for light industrial commercial future use, which I personally informed the council about. There has been no noise assessment performed in regards to the application. The development is in the immediate setting of 4 listed buildings in a semi-rural, thus countryside location, and such a development is restricted to urban areas by policy. Purpose-built units and land is available at the end of Leybourne Way within Panetone Estate for this development. The area surrounding Great Lunsford Farmhouse should be kept as residential only, which is within the keeping of this area and which was the initial proposal for that area of land under the permission that has already been granted. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we've got Elaine Hills next on my list, but her statement is to be read by Chris Twyman.
We do not need another industrial estate in Larkfield when there is vacant and plentiful sites such as the Panetone estate. The government policies for housing and there is already planning for a house at this location. This is already a residential site, so the application is wrongly titled, as everyone knows. The site keeps stating in objections. KCC have been negligent in not attending the road, just as they were when the 20-mile-per-hour speed limit was adopted in nearby Larkfield, and they forgot to include Lunsford Lane North. And when this was pointed out to them before works commenced, the response was, oh well, the report has been done now. So the consequence is we are stuck with a 60-mile-per-hour speed limit in probably the very road that needs the 20-mile-per-hour speed limit more than any other in this area. My point is that KCC did not research the area correctly, and we live with the danger to safety of that decision, and no lessons have been learnt, as again there is a refusal by KCC to attend the site. Photographic evidence of a lorry on the residential drive leading to this site is ignored, and planning / KCC continue to state there will be no lorries, and stating a 6-metre turning circle is sufficient for vans to turn in when it is not even big enough for large cars to turn in. With regard to parking, there are more parking spaces as a requirement of this site than there are houses in the lane. So their comments that movement will not significantly increase demonstrates a lack of logic being applied. I have also noted that there have planning for a garage at the rear, but have identified parking immediately in front of it that will result in any cars in the garage being blocked in. I believe there is a high probability that staff having to keep shuttling their cars in the future will not be workable, and they will end up parking in the road that is predominantly double yellow lines. Or the applicant has no intention of using the garage for cars, it is unusual for companies to build actual garages for staff parking. Is this building intended for a different use? Cars do park on the double yellow lines at times. That makes the whole safety situation worse. No traffic wardens attend, and if you call the police in times of a complete roadblock, they tell you to call highways or council. If you take a photograph of the vehicle on the double yellow lines and report it to the council and all highways, we have been told there is nothing they can do unless they are there themselves to see it, but they never have patrols to see it. In summary, there will be significantly more cars, vans and lorries, and the lane will at some point take the overspill, affecting the amenities, safety and character of this rural lane.
Thank you very much. Next person on my list is David Carslaw and Dixie Hart is presenting his statement.
This objection is from the son of the family who owned this development and sold it to the existing owners seeking new planning permission. I am David Carslaw and son of the previous owner of the proposed planning application and have been familiar with, grew up and lived at the site for 60 years. As well as agreeing with the other objections made online, I have the following points to make. The existing building has been a residential garage since 1992, and previous to this, it was an agricultural building. It was never used as a commercial workshop or as a commercial office space. And if it is currently being used for these purposes, then there was no planning permission granted for this change of use as far as I'm aware. By saying that this is the current use of the property is misleading, disingenuous, as it suggests that the new application is not changing the use of the site, and it certainly is not a minor change. The property was sold to the current owner with planning permission, TM2300397 FL, granted to demolish the existing building and erect a 4-bedroom residential home. The demolition of the existing building has already been started, as 1/6 of the property has been demolished prior to the sale and a boundary fence erected as per planning conditions. This effectively means that the work had started in turning the site into a residential home, and so shouldn't the current application be to change use from a residential home to a commercial property? Previous planning conditions for a residential property were very precise on the appearance of the new building, in that it should fit in with surrounded listed buildings and enhance the area. Proposed building with its Juliet balconies and 5 folding doors and vertical cladding does not fit in at all well with the surroundings and will arguably devalue them. The applicant's own statement describes this build as in keeping with light industrial. We don't want something in keeping with light industrial. We want something for the countryside.
Thank you. And we now have Fiona Ray speaking for herself.
Having read the report recommendations, I'm not satisfied that my previous objections to the proposed development of the land and the building east of Rose Cottage are unfounded. I believe that the noise and the air pollution from industrial activity would be a nuisance to the neighbouring properties, including my own, and potentially also impact on the many visitors to Leybourne Lakes Country Park. Whilst I appreciate that the recommendation that the activity be limited to Class E, Criterion G, I wonder how the impact in terms of noise, smell, fumes, smoke, soot, ash, dust or grit caused by the industrial processes undertaken in the workshop would be monitored to ensure that it was not detrimental to those nearby. Regarding the demolition and construction phases, the restriction of noisy working hours is less than reassuring, as the permitted hours include the times when we are most likely to be outside and thus exposed to the noise. But of even more concern is the inevitable increase in traffic to the proposed site, which would be unsuitable for this section of Lunsford Lane, being a single track road without pavements. The inconvenience caused to my neighbours, whose residential driveway would be shared by the 12 cars for which parking spaces are proposed, plus the potentially large-scale vehicles that would be delivering and collecting from the unit, is likely to be considerable. And crucially, the substantial increase in traffic flow would pose a danger to the great number of pedestrians and cyclists who use the road. In addition to those accessing Leybourne Lakes Country Park via Lunsford Lane, this is a popular route for young people to make their way to and from the local secondary schools. I consider that it would only be a matter of time before an accident occurred with potentially tragic consequences. I do feel that the proposed industrial buildings and associated activity are out of keeping in this quiet residential area, which includes historically significant Grade 2 listed buildings. Whilst I recognise the potential of this site for development, the previous planning permission, which provided additional much needed housing, made sense. A more appropriate site for this industrial unit and office space can surely be found where there is no negative impact on current residents and the local population. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now Jason Humphreys and Dixie Hart is speaking on his behalf.
I have to add something to this speech because of what you've been told. You've been told that the building next to the building is an ancillary building to the barn. It shows how much little research has been done on this. It's a house and it belongs to Jason Humphreys, who I'm reading this for. I live 1.1 metres from the boundary of this proposed development and 3.75 metres from the proposed industrial workshop and offices in direct line of my bedroom. I often work nights. The applicant disregarded the lack of planning permission and used the site for waste disposal via skips and noisy machinery in the shed. Sleep was impossible all day. No noise test has been carried out and included with this application. It's unacceptable in a residential area. Sadly, I feel no comfort in planning including conditions when the applicant operates without planning or penalty and therefore demonstrates little regard for regulations. This included driving a van up the residential drive past the bedrooms of 2 residential homes one morning at 2 a.m, again waking me whilst loading a van because their employee needed an early start. ACC accepted a 6-metre turning circle was sufficient. An average van such as a Mercedes Vito is 4.7 metres long. How will that turn around with 1.3 metres spare? In fact, the directors drive drive vehicles such as an equivalent to Range Rovers, and they are over 5 metres in length, and they reverse out onto the road when they're there, so will vans. ACC and planning suggest there will be no deliveries or collections by lorries, and yet they've been sent photographic evidence of a huge lorry on their driveway. It's disingenuous to ignore the fact that lorries have been used even before permission is granted. Planning and KCC have also received a written statement that this lorry driver asked the owner of a neighbouring property if he could reverse out across their drive because he couldn't get back out. It's logical to conclude lorries will continue to deliver and collect if permission is granted. To the rear and overlooking my bedroom and garden, the building proposes 5 bifolding glass doors with Juliet-style balconies overlooking my garden, not in keeping with the 3 surrounding Grade 2 listed buildings on each side of this development. Nor is the vertical cladding and the zinc roof. None appear on any of the listed buildings of historic interest. The site plan with the application does not even label the annex as a house. It labels it and makes it assume that it is an outbuilding. My home appears as a garage. Jason Humphreys.
Thank you. And number 10 on my list is Denise Eden Green. On her own behalf.
Good evening. I'm here tonight to ask members to refuse this application. I've lived in another of the converted barns on the Great Lunsford farm site for nearly 34 years, and I'd like to make 2 points. The first concerns the change of designation from what it is currently, a 4-bedroom domestic dwelling, that is a family home, to a commercial building which becomes the permanent workplace of 8 to 12 people. The second concerns the scale and nature of what is in front of you tonight. The proposed development is grossly disproportionate to anything that has taken place, to my certain knowledge, in any of the barns or sheds on the site over the last 34 years that I've lived there. It's also completely out of character with the rest of the site and our narrow country lane. When I came to live in my converted barn 34 years ago, the outbuildings belonged to Great Lunsford Farm were in a gradual process of being converted into homes. I'm very proud to say that I live in the old cowshed. You will understand from this that the direction of travel over all these years has been to convert the redundant farm outbuildings into domestic properties. The shed, which is the subject of this application, was the last of the redundant barns to be redesignated as a domestic dwelling. Approval was granted in December 23, and I gather some initial demolition work and setting out of boundaries has already taken place to establish this as a detached dwelling in its own right, having previously been attached to Rose Cottage. So contrary to what the report implies, the proposal would require a change of use from domestic to commercial and remove potential home from TNBC's housing target. This makes no sense when many thousands of people are in need of a safe home and there's surplus of commercial property already available nearby. Secondly, it's important to understand that this small corner of Larkfield that was the hub of a family farm for over 100 years has never seen anything remotely on the scale of what is being proposed for this application. This shed awaiting conversion to a home was formerly the old farm office. Retired farmers' 2 sons converted my home and all the other homes on the farm themselves and used the old shed as their base to manage the business side of the project. This gradually diminished as the conversions were completed some 25 years ago, but the old farm office remained in use as additional family accommodation. It was never a workplace for anyone outside the family, and Gordon, the retired farmer, used it mainly as a garage, somewhere to brew a cup of tea, and for his wood-turning hobby until his death in 2016. The report in front of you tonight seems to try and blur the difference between the proposal and what the shed was in the past, whereas they are chalk and cheese. What's being proposed is completely out of character and grossly out of scale for this location, and I ask the members to refuse this application.
Next is Gary Hart, and statement to be read by Dixie Hart.
The character and appearance of this proposal is not appropriate and of poor design that fails to reflect the local design policies and government guidance. Therefore, policy states this should be refused. 5 full-height glass bifolding doors with Juliet balconies are desirably modern contemporary buildings, but far from complementary, surrounding historic and listed buildings on 3 sides. Planning state not many comments have been raised concerning this. They state this as a reason to grant, and yet if granted, 93 objectors have been ignored. The character and appearance of the building is of concern to many. However, many are not trained to read architect drawings. They may think that buildings are ancillary when actually they're not, and found the portal difficult to navigate. But when seeing, objectors agree is not in keeping, does not enhance or sit well in this small historic area within the countryside, and therefore does not fit in with the policies the planning officer suggests. Despite sending actual photographs of a large lorry on the site shared residential driveway, the planning officer and KCC wrote there will be no lorries. How can that statement be made? KCC have stated a 6-metre diameter circle is sufficient to turn all vehicles in. Mark a 6-metre circle on the road and try and turn a medium car, let alone a lorry. Leave yourself plenty of time, as it will take you quite a few turns. Google it and it will tell you 7 to 12 metres is required for a van. A London taxi needs 8. Complaints have been made regarding noise, disturbance and a van loading at 2 a.m, waking all the neighbours. It will worsen if planning is granted. Remember, this site is accessed via a residential driveway with 2 homes and alongside a 3rd home's boundary. Planning described Mr Humphrey's home 1.1 metres from the boundary of the site as an outbuilding, as indicated on the applicant's ill-prepared and false site plan. Planning did not check it or see it during their meeting personally with the applicant on site. The 1st floor window of the site faces the annex, and the front and back overlook the gardens of both the barn and the annex, which is in full view of the site, contrary to the planner's report. Mistaking a home as an outbuilding is a repetitive lack of checking the applicant's statements and application. Planning state there are a series of conversions and new builds incorrect. A series of new build properties do not exist. There are only 10 residential curtilages in the lane. Planning described the shed at the site as a new build, which is puzzling as they have visited the site and the shed is clearly ancient.
Thank you. Next is Jade Newman, statement to be read by Maria Douglas.
During some of the paperwork, planning's report sometimes confirms the site as a residential home, granted permission in 2023, and other times as an existing workshop and offices. The description should be constant throughout and not change depending on which policy they are relying on. If this is accepted as a dwelling, then the heading of this application is, by the officer's own statement, incorrect as an existing workshop. Separation issues for a residential house are minimal, but having offices as an industrial unit that close in this area is a big issue. A large container arrived at the site almost a year ago. It is not in the planning application and demonstrates the applicant's nature to disregard regulations. They have carried out their business at the site, storing goods and disposal skips without permission. Therefore, the planning officer's comments on what their report about applying conditions is welcomed, but who is realistically enforcing them? Flooding. Referring to the planning officer report, locals have raised concerns about the extra traffic during flooding. There are more parking spaces in this proposal than there are actual properties in the lane, so obviously a significant increase in vehicles, plus delivery, collections and visitors' vehicles. The road floods regularly, and so much that you cannot see where the stream starts and the road ends. The fire brigade attended this year because a lorry got stuck by the stream. This creates much greater risks of vehicle accidents and consequently safety for human life. There is also a small old bridge that is unlikely to be able to take the weight of a large lorry, but at its best, strength is unknown. A reason for refusal is protecting character and amenities of the highway. Planning for a house in 2023 was titled Demolition of an Existing Garage, Workshop, Barn Building. In 2024, it was titled as a minor change to existing workshop and office space. How could the description of the shed change in a matter of months when one owner was deceased and the other one in a care home? Highways and parking. So many objections have been submitted. KCC have not visited the site and even forgot to include this lane when changing the speed limits in Larkfield to 20 mile an hour. Therefore, Lunsford Lane North remains at a 60 mile an hour, and that is unacceptable as this proposal. I'd just like to stand corrected from the planning officer. She titled the house closest to the building as ancillary. Actually, someone lives in that house, and it is 474. It's titled the annex at 474. There is a human living in that building. It's not ancillary. And also MP Angela Rayner would like 1.5 million houses built in her duration, her time, and this could be one of them. Thank you.
And now John Eden Green on his own behalf.
Good evening. I moved to Great Lunsford Farm 34 years ago. The shed was a store for agricultural machinery. And when he stopped farming, it became a rather palatial workshop for Gordon Carslaw Sons. It was never used for commercial purposes, always agricultural or more recently domestic. Since 1990, there have been no farming or commercial activities anywhere on the whole area has been residential. Lunsford Lane is very much a rural lane, with many more pedestrians using it than vehicles. There are limited verges, so pedestrians have to walk on the road. Ironically, a road which still has a 60-mile speed, many people said. This is perhaps another example of the authorities' lack of local knowledge. Character and safety of the lane does not warrant an industrial unit being accessed by an additional 12 vehicles, at least 12 vehicles, plus countless delivery vehicles. Previous successful application for a 4-bedroom residence would create far fewer vehicle movements and be totally in keeping with it. Already numerous statements have been made about HGVs accessing the site, so I won't repeat. HGVs do still occasionally already deliver to properties on the lane. They have done over the years. Most frequently, it's the refuse collection vehicle. Now that, along with a number of other HGVs, have to access the lane by reversing into the lane from Leybourne Way. Or even worse, they drive in forwards and then have to reverse out. Those who decide to exit using the north section of the lane have been known to get stuck as other people, including in involvement with them. The applicant has stated that business activities will be primarily office operations and deliveries limited to office supplies. One questions the need for any workshop space if this is true. How does the council propose to ensure the activities comply with the proposed permission of Class EG? What is to prevent the applicant or future occupiers undertaking industrial processes in the future, which would be permitted under EG? Perhaps such enforcement is not so important for a development in a commercial area, but when this would be the only commercial building within a wholly residential area, this most certainly would not be the case. I ask that members refuse the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and please stay where you are. All right. Because I think you're reading on behalf of Teresa Allingham.
Numerous objections have been made to planning about the existing and previous use of this site. This application is far from a, quote, minor change, and it is not existing commercial, office or industrial. No historical permissions have been granted for commercial, so if it was illegal use. Use by the previous farmer has been exaggerated. Planning have many written statements from individuals who know the site, including the previous owners. So why are they reporting advice from the applicant, who is not from the area and knows nothing about the history? If planning believed it was commercial, then why has a contaminated land assessment not been requested to satisfy paragraphs 189 to 190 of the MPPF? No council tax has ever been paid on this site that has no electricity, gas or water connected. Why would planning state they believe it was commercial without these essential facilities? Planning was granted in 2023 for a residential site of a 4-bedroom house. Work has already started on the demolition of the shed and access. Planning know this, but have not included it in their report. As work started, is this not residential seeking to change to industry? The government's policy is to build houses, not deny them to an industrial unit for which there are plenty of the local industrial estate off New Hythe Lane. The applicant has a large container-style building transported in almost a year ago, but it is not included in their application. Planning made no reference to it in their report. The offices and workshop will have 12 staff, parking spaces, 2 motorcycle spaces, access to Lunsford Lane is a small single-track rural lane that accesses only 10 homes and an entrance to Leybourne Lakes Country Park. The development will generate significant amounts of movement, particularly when compared against existing conditions that are unsuitable for this character of lane and will be detrimental to safety due to it being a pedestrian walk without pavement or verges to the entrance of Leybourne Lake. According to paragraph 117 of the MPPF and the National Planning Practice Guidance, a transport assessment should be requested by planning. This is a semi-rural location outside an established urban settlement, therefore countryside in planning policy terms.
Very much. And lastly, I have Elaine Lewis, statement read by Denise Eden Green.
So this is Elaine Lewis's 3-minute statement. I have lived next to Lunsford Lane for over 50 years. My son went to the same schools and is the same age as Gordon and Joe Carslaw's sons. Hence, I have known the family and property for many years. When the boys were young, there were just fields and cows from Partridge Avenue all the way to Lunsford Farm. I saw the comment from planning that the agricultural shed was a new build. It must be at least 50 years old and looks it, built out of corrugated tin. I do not wish to be rude, but I cannot imagine how anyone would ever describe it as a new build. I did feel another memory was lost when planning was granted approximately 18 months ago for a house. But I know times move on and people need homes, and it is what the government says we must do. But when I saw someone was trying to change that to an industrial and office unit, I was shocked. I never imagined all those historic homes and a little lane in the countryside would ever be considered suitable for industrial and offices. I'm not qualified to know all the policies, but I have read other reports on the portal, and a lot of people have quoted all sorts of policies this application does not comply with. Though I do not understand why such an outlandish proposal has even got this far. There seems to be so many mistakes. The heading description is definitely wrong. I have visited that site for years. The shed isn't offices and never has been. Gordon used to do his paperwork in there to get some peace from the children, and Jo, his wife, encouraged him in there to get him out from under her feet. As the boys got older, they always had their heads under the bonnet of their old cars in there. Gordon would take his kettle and be happy in there for hours. He used to make all sorts of knickknacks Jo did not want, but he was happy. I saw the site drawing, big glass doors with balconies. That does not fit in around this area, and I won't talk about how ridiculous it is to have vans and lorries on that road, as you have already had lots of objections about that, and I have to keep this to 3 minutes. Gordon's tractor was always parked in there, so please start listening to the locals who know. I know both the sons have told you what that shed was used for. Why are they not listened to? Because they would have no reason to say otherwise. Very much.
Thank you very much. And I've now called Pete Hadley, who's the agent for the applicant.
The application before you seeks planning permission to replace the existing dilapidated and desirable building on the site that has previously been used as a vehicle workshop, as explained within your officer's report. For this to be replaced with a new office building and ancillary workshop. Back on the point that said this is not a residential use. There's been a previous residential permission. That may be a preference of some people that are objecting this evening. That residential use would only become residential use once the dwelling was substantially completed and capably occupied. So this is not a residential site. Proposed building is of a high quality, sustainable design, with this designed by a local architect. This is supported by your officers, including the conservation officer, who is satisfied that the building will not harm the setting of the nearby listed building or character of the area. It's been designed to be no bigger than the existing workshop and would have a smaller footprint by comparison. The proposed building would be used to provide an office for the applicant's business along with a small ancillary workshop to work on prototype products. There will be no manufacturing on site or industrial activities. No heavy goods vehicles would need to come to the site to associate the proposed Class C use. Your officers have considered this application in great detail, including the objections that you've heard from this evening. Their report is thorough, and this is reflected in the contents of it before you tonight. The report confirms the replacement of the existing building, which is in a rural area for economic development purposes, according to policy DC2 of the DPD. It does not conflict with the National Planning Policy Framework. Paragraph 88 of that document states that planning permissions and decisions should enable sustainable growth and expansion of all types of business in rural areas through the conversion of existing buildings and well-designed new buildings. The objections from third parties from a high-risk perspective, much of which focus on the pre-existing concerns in the area, have been considered by both your officers and KCC Highways, who support the recommendation to approve. They reviewed the surrounding road network and the modest scale of the proposal. The applicant has confirmed that no heavy goods vehicles will be coming to and from the site. There will be adequate car parking for employees. Business activities will be primarily involve office operations with the occasional delivery of office supplies by van. In terms of concerns regarding noise and disturbance, these have also been considered by officers, including environmental health, who support the case of permission to be granted subject to planning conditions. As you will see, the report before you confirms that the condition would restrict to use class EG, but allow the building to be used as an office and for the research and development of products only. This use is defined as one that can take place in a residential area without causing harm to amenity. The applicants have no objection to this condition, as their use of the building will cause with the definition. Were that condition to be breached, it would be enforceable by the local planning authority. In light of this condition, and as the proposed building reflects the scale of the existing, the report confirms that no unacceptable harm to amenity would be caused, and this includes overlooking. The application is supported by all professional consultees advising on land contamination, flood risk, ecology, highways and heritage. I therefore ask you to support the recommendation to grant planning permission accordingly.
Thank you. That completes all the representations, 16 of them altogether. And I think I ought to say something now, as the report records at paragraph 2, I called in this application on the broad grounds stated there of neighbour amenity and highway issues. Somewhat awkward having to do this as the chairman, and I haven't got any colleagues from Larkfield present because they're both on holiday. I should report that I did get an email from Anita Oakley in Australia who says, my concern about this application is that despite all the conditions being imposed, the building is surrounded by converted barns, all once being part of Lunsford Farm with some listed. I fear that introducing a commercial use will cause disturbance to the residents, especially the 2 converted barns, now dwellings, by the access way to the site from the lane. I also feel that this part of Lunsford Lane from Labourn Way out to the A228 is unsuitable for attracting vans and other commercial vehicles to this site. It is a country lane now, forming a route used by walkers, cyclists and parents with buggies heading to the country park from Lunsford Lane area south of Labourn Way. This is demonstrated by the many letters of objection. As I've said, I called in this application on the grounds stated, and I've read out what Anita's said. And the position is I still remain concerned about the application, as it introduces what is described as a mixed office and workshop in place of the dwelling which was approved for this site. In respect of highway issues, it is now always difficult with KCC no longer sending anyone to support their views or answer members' put questions, and that always puts our officers in the difficulty of trying to speak on their behalf based on their written representation. However, just to be clear, it's never been my concern that this site would cause congestion. It's not my concern that it will cause, quote, severe congestion. It is just this section of Lunsford Lane, north of Labour Way, there is a country lane with a sign erected by the KCC saying unsuitable for HGVs, and due to its one-track nature, it has a narrow entry order at the north end where it joins the A228 lay-by, used as a lorry stopover. The lane is now used since the coming of the country park by walkers, including parents with children going to the country park and particularly more recently to the cafe, and they walk across from the built-up part of Lunsford Lane to the south across Labour Way where there are traffic islands and then walk down this road. However, my other concern is this proposal will result in a commercial use into what is now a former farm complex where every single other building except this one has been converted to residential use. And as the report records, several of these are Grade 2 listed buildings, and one in particular is very close, as well as the driveway to this site passing two dwellings. And those two dwellings were formerly farm buildings themselves, and they're quite small. And the access road is a residential road that served them. And my concern is there will be an impact on what is now otherwise a completely residential area in a rural location. I think, however well conditioned, there is likely to be disturbance by noise and coming and goings to the detriment of residential amenities of the existing dwellings. And I would also comment on the fact that that the site appears to be already being used. And I can recall once being told by a former planning officer of this authority, David, you shouldn't worry about the fact it's already being used because that enables you to make a judgment as to what's likely to happen when there is planning permission granted. And I think that is a potential argument. And listening to what the residents say, I think I should draw out that there is a building adjacent to this property which is separately occupied, and I think that needs to be taken into account. But basically, I think however well conditioned this application is, and I accept what the officers have done about that, and they've tried their best, I think down the line it would cause disturbance to the residents, and it would be a difficult site, noise, day-to-day goings, and so forth. And that's without going on and trying to go through the report line by line and so forth, is my general concern about the site. But I'll be interested to hear what other members say. Hickmott. Councillor Paul Hickmott.
Well, I've read the report and I've listened very carefully to the residents. And first of all, it's very nice to have an Area 3 planning committee, which is very welcome. My second point is there was controversy in Area 2 about the number of residents turning up to talk to a planning application. But I think it's a very good thing that if people are allowed to come and have their say on something, which is obviously very controversial. So that was very welcome. And my third point is I personally cannot make a decision on this unless I actually go and have a look at the site, because although there were photographs of it, I'm not entirely sure. I know the area it's in, but I'm not sure of the exact location of the site. So therefore, I would like to propose we defer the decision and go for a site meeting.
Thank you. Sue Bell.
Right, well, I'd like to second what Paul's just proposed, because I'm quite aware of where that, I think people think of Lunsford Lane being the opposite side of the road and don't realise where that is, where they all live, is quite unique, very unique. And there does seem to be some confusion here about what the building is. Also, I would be very concerned because so many people walk down there to Leybourne Country Park. You've got dogs, you've got people, you've got young children running along with their parents, and it would concern me we've got quite an increase in traffic. And you certainly wouldn't come from the north end, from Snodland end. You don't even walk from the other ends because it's just a little dirt track where the stream just overflows. So I do realise their concern.
Proposed and seconded. Does anyone else want to say anything? Trudy Dean. Trudy's not a member of this committee, but she's entitled to come and give her views.
Thank you, Chairman. As you know, I'm the county member as well for this area. And I won't go into all the details of what I was going to say because other members have said it for me. But my greatest concern about this whole application is that, frankly, I thought when I saw the highways judgment, it was barking mad. I can't think of a road which is less suitable for HGVs or anything remotely larger than a normal car. Because I think about 20 years ago, Chairman, but one forgets, I was responsible for having the sign push up which says that it is unsuitable for HGVs. And the reason that I had that sign put up was because we were getting repetitions of lorries having to be pulled out of this section of road when they got stuck, and that might either be because of flooding or it might be because there was another vehicle in the way and they couldn't get round it. But for whatever reason, it was continually being a problem, usually involving the police having to come and nurse guide a vehicle out into the flow of traffic in Lunsford Lane, in Leybourne Way. And of course, that was 20 years ago. We've now got Panetone as a major logistical site, and the flow of traffic is much heavier now than it was there then. But my concern was when I saw the documentation from highways. I don't know how you say this politely, but there were a number of phrases which seemed to indicate that somebody had visited the site, but did so in such an evasive way that it left some question in my mind as to whether anybody had actually visited the site. There were, I think, 2 or 3 indications in various letters from highways, and they continued to be evasive about it. And then eventually a straight question was asked and they agreed that they had not visited the site. And so, Chairman, we had a full county council meeting today, 10 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock at night. That was fun. And I took the opportunity to go and talk to the Highways Cabinet member, Neil Baker. And I explained the situation and said to him, under what circumstances do highway engineers intervene and address issues on site? Are they simply talking about issues with regard to severity and congestion, or are they allowed, in inverted commas, to talk to other issues like pedestrian safety, which I consider is a major issue here? And he said, well, the criteria within which they report are really quite strict. So I explained that I thought that members, that a highways officer needed to have visited this site to look at the in the round situation. You've got a road which is entirely unsuitable because of tight bends for HGVs to be there in the first place. Then on top of all of that, you've got the lack of footpaths and the demand for that for them to walk along that road to access the back of the Leybourne Lakes estate, Leybourne Lakes Park. And I said to him, what do I have to do to get a highways engineer to actually come and visit the site? And he said, call a site meeting is the best way. So what members are asking for seems to be entirely consistent with what the cabinet member at KCC believes to be the best way forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Joyce put her hand up. Would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I understand that members are proposing going for a site visit. Just wanted to clarify that in the Constitution, in Protocol E, therefore, there has to be a member site visit should only be used where the benefit of doing so is clear and substantial. And the decision to hold a site inspection must fit at least one of the following criteria. So it lists 4 criteria there. So I don't know if the councillor has proposed, to go for the site visit. I don't know if you might have a particular one that you've picked out of the 4 criteria. I can read it out. The first one is where particular site factors are so significant in terms of weight attached to them relative to other factors, and that a site inspection will be the only way to assess those factors. B says it is essential in order to reach a view on an application that the specific and particular characteristics of the site need to be viewed on the ground in order to assess the broader material impact of the proposal. And the C says the proposal raises specific matters in respect of site characteristics, the importance of which can only be established by means of a site inspection. And then D says the proposal is of such a major or strategic scale that a site inspection is essential to enable members to be fully familiar with all site-related matters of fact. So obviously Sally would have to record either A, B, C, or D in the minutes. So just to be clear that the site visit as well, the purpose of the site inspection is solely for planning committee members to view the site and its surroundings and to relate the application proposal to the site. So that's basically what you're going there for. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy. And I have got a copy of the rules concerning site inspections, but James has indicated, so I'll come to him next.
Thank you very much, Chair, for the opportunity to speak. I will just add in there and correct me if the head of legal. I think one of the exemptions on that is exceptionally when it's also proposed at the planning committee. I think the word exceptional is used because I think a request was sent round earlier as to the constitutional requirements, but I don't think we got a response from the member who requested the application to be called in. I may be incorrect in that, but that was just my view on that. But I also wanted to come back on what Councillor Dean was saying around KCC possibly attending. Obviously, we can't compel KCC to come if members vote through a site meeting. All we can do is send a request out, but there's no guarantee that you'll get a KCC officer that would attend the site meeting. But all we could do is obviously send that request out to them, give them a date and the time of when it's had, and it will be up to KCC and their management team to decide whether they send that officer out. So I just wanted to sort of set that out. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, James. And I think the committee understands that we can't get county officers to do much at all. Roger Dalton.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. We've had a proposal and we've had a councillor second that proposal. Should we not go to the vote now?
Thank you, Roger. I do take what Joy has said, and I have looked at this paragraph. Well, the writing's a bit small, and it goes on about calling in applications for a site inspection before it comes to committee. But Then it goes on to say, otherwise, only exceptionally should an item be deferred for a site inspection, and it should only take place if voted for by a majority of the area planning committee. I don't know.
And then the next, a separate section then explains in E6.3
yes,
when site inspection should only be used.
Yeah. Yes, I've got that, Joy. I'm coming to it. So it seems to me the wording there is for members. It's for members to decide whether it meets that criteria or not. But as Joy says, there are other items as to why we want a site inspection, and I would suggest, for the purpose of at least minutes, we should say that it's to enable us to assess the application as it relates to the adjoining properties, including the listed buildings. And I don't think I'll include this. I would also add, if the two people agree, that we should invite a representative, the county council, to send a highways representative to the site inspection, and that would be a further reason for having one, and that we record that as part of the proposal in the minutes. Is that you happy with that? Okay. And we rely on you, Trudy, to make sure this happens.
Before we move to a vote, I think it would be beneficial to first seek clarity in terms of which specific criteria are we trying to defer this application to enable a site visit to take place, because the Constitution is very clear in terms of the circumstances in which a site visit can be requested, and I appreciate the points being raised in terms of the potential impact on listed building, and there were also discussion about highway implication. But then, in order to for a site visit, those criteria, one of those criteria will have to be met. So, if members can please provide us some clarity in terms of the justification, then we'll get it recorded properly. So,
I think it's B, really, isn't it?
would any members want to contribute?
David.
Chairman, I've read the report and I've listened to the public, and I've listened to you, and I've listened to the general argument. It does strike me, and I haven't seen the site, I haven't tried to look at the site, but I have a feeling that I need to see this site. It struck me that if we were given 4 reasons, it sounded to me, I haven't looked at this, I haven't compared this or anything, that conditions 1, 2, and 3 apply completely in my mind. I can't get away from that. Can you please read the first 3, all 4 of them again? It struck me that 1, 2, and 3 applied.
Yeah.
Would you like me to read that out, or the chair wants? I'm happy to read it out again.
So
Okay, so
A is particular site factors are so significant in terms of weight attached to them relative to other factors, and that a site inspection would be the only way to assess these matters. That's number A.
Right. Well, it strikes me that we seem to have a problem with the road that is in dispute. The highway authority says you can get an HGV down there easily, and people tell me they can't. I'd like to see for myself.
Okay, and to complete it, so you know, I'm saying what's there. Item B, it is essential in order to reach a view on the application that a specific and particular characteristics of the site need to be viewed on the ground in order to assess the broader material aspect of the proposals. And I think that
it's my personal feeling that I want to see the old barns and see these new ones, see this new, set it in context.
and then C, the proposal remains, covers specific matters in respect of the characteristics, the importance of which can only be established by means of a site inspection. And I think that also applies. And the last one talks about it's a strategic matter. I don't think that does apply. Paul Hickmott.
Well, from what you're saying, at least the first three, A, B, and C, all apply to it. So you can apply either all of them or whichever one you wish.
Dean.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just suggest, since you're giving me the responsibility of marching a highway officer down there, in the letter that goes from the Borough Council to the county inviting an officer, could reference be made to the conversation that I had with Neil Baker? You'll appreciate he deals with cases right across the county, and it would enable him to remember the one that I'm talking about. Thank you.
Note what you say. Note that we have a site, defer this application for a site inspection. Is there general agreement to that, or do you want me to have a show of hands? That's everyone who can vote, so I declare that carried. Arrange such a site inspection and hopefully reported back to the next meeting of this committee. Thank you all for your attendance. I ought to explain with regard to the site inspection for the members of the public's interest that the site inspection is only for the purpose of looking at the site. It's attended only by members of this committee who can come along to the time arranged. And it's not an opportunity to discuss the merits or otherwise of this proposal, including with the applicant. The applicant will be invited to be there, and also a representative of the parish council if they wish to send anyone. But again, the representative of the parish council can only observe and can't take part in the site inspection. Just thought it's useful to say that, and then following the site inspection, it should come back to the next meeting of this committee. We've got, when I find it, the list of planning appeal decisions for our area, 2 sides of them. Agenda item 7. As local member, can I say I was particularly pleased with the decisions on 6 Jerome Road and 5 Keats Road. And I think you're just invited to note these unless anyone wants to say anything. But
whatever could get an officer's opinion on 1 Heron Court. This is probably no, it's not preempting anything. But 1 Heron Court is the putting doors on a carport. I just wondered what the effect of the new Kent design guide instead of IGN 3 would be on that decision as far as the inspectors are concerned.
Thank you. I don't know if anyone's able to answer that off the cuff.
Yeah, in response to the query about Kent County Council's new parking design guide, it doesn't apply retrospectively to application already decided or appeal decision already made, but it will become material planning consideration for any future planning application. So as far as I understand it, this one was refused. No, it was originally refused on the basis that it would result in a loss of carport, which we considered under the former parking design guide to be a valid car parking space, which we then considered to be a reason for refusal based on the shortfall. Now, inspector disagree on the basis that there is no on-street parking restrictions in the vicinity, and he did not consider there to be any detrimental impact resulting from displayed vehicles. So that's why the decision was, the appeal was allowed. What else? Yes, so in addition, for that side, there were space adequate for accommodating the number of number of vehicles required, but not in its current form. So they have got grass area, but they would have to convert the grass area into car parking space in order to satisfy the parking standard, which the inspector did give some regard to it. So if they need to, they can convert that area to be parking standard compliant. So it was on that basis that the appeal was allowed.
Very clear. Thank you very, very much indeed. Thanks.
Thank you for that very full reply. Sorry, James.
My reply certainly won't be as full as that, but I'll just highlight to, obviously we've got the report going to H&P very soon in terms of the parking standards and the material consideration. So that will be a debate also for housing and planning to have next week. Just to update members, if you wish to tune into that debate and listen to what's said. Thank you.
Can't wait.
Thank you, James. Right. I'm not aware of any matters being raised to be considered in private, and I therefore close the meeting. Thank you for your attendance.